What happens in 37 seconds? Well, it's about the amount of time it takes for my cat to clear his plate at dinner time. It's also the average amount of time that a person in the UK spends brushing their teeth. And it's the amount of time it takes for someone to make an impression. It doesn't sound like very long, does it? In fact, it's probably the amount of time I've been talking to you now. But whether you are a seasoned pro or whether you are brand new to presenting, whether it's an online meeting, a pre-recorded message, a presentation to hundreds in a conference hall, or a meeting just one-to-one, we're going to explore today in 6 simple steps how you can make the most of those interactions. Image. In the 1970s, a professor called Albert Mehrabian did a communication study which revealed that we communicate 55% through our body language, 38% through the tone of our voice, and only 7% through the words that we use. It's not very much, is it? If Mehrabian's to be believed, it's not what we say, but it's how we say it. So let's think about that. First of all, let's look at it when we're working online. Now, if we're dealing with an online meeting that's perhaps live, our eye line definitely wants to probably be at the person that we're talking to in the meeting. But if this is a pre-recorded message, just like this one that I'm doing for you now, I'm going to look down the lens. What that does is it creates a sense of intimacy. It feels like I'm just having a conversation with you wherever you are in your home. Now, if you are speaking to hundreds of people, it is still going to be a conversation with another person. And we want to encourage that by creating that line between yourself and the person in their living room or in their office. We're creating that intimacy by looking down the lens. Sometimes it's quite helpful to give yourself a coloured sticker next to the lens or perhaps the camera that you're recording on, so it gives you something definite to look at. Now, when we're recording online, or if we're in a meeting online, we want to think also about the framing that we use. Too far out and we lose any detail. So you really want to be thinking about head and shoulders, or maybe just a tiny little bit wider from the waist to the top of the head. That way we can see your eyes. And if we can see your eyes, we can see your thoughts. Thinking and listening are absolutely intertwined. And like I said, this is a conversation, whether it's a meeting or a presentation. So think about that. When we're listening, we can see that we're listening with our eyes. Also, think about how you're lighting yourself. Good lighting gives a professional impression. So think about investing in a relatively inexpensive ring light or box light to give yourself that professional look. Also think about your background. Do you want something nice and plain like I've got now, which is probably useful if you're doing a recorded presentation or a presentation to lots of people? Or if you've got a meeting, you might want something a little bit more personal in the background. It's nice to be able to see where people are and what they're about. And it's very easy to forget in a professional environment that we're humans too, with lives. And that connection can be incredibly useful sometimes. But do think about what is in the background. You don't want your children's toys scattered around or the old washing, but you might want maybe a couple of books, a nice picture, but nothing too busy. Remember, this is part of the message that you're sending out. We want to look at you, not your background, so make sure we're not getting distracted. If you are recording something, another thing that might be worth investing in is a tripod to put your camera or your phone on. If you do, make sure that the camera is the height of your eyes. It's in line with those eyes. It just, again, allows us to feel like we're having a conversation in the room together. Now, hopefully we're going to be getting back face-to-face in some instances in the near future. So if we're in a conference room or a big hall giving a presentation, we can bring that into our bodies too. That 55%, like Mehrabian said, is incredibly important. And if we use it right, it can trick our mind into relaxing and feeling more confident too. So whether you're sitting down in an online meeting or standing up in a conference hall somewhere, make sure that your feet are planted nice and firmly on the ground. We don't just want to be a head on a stick. We are all interconnected, and if our feet are properly anchored, it means that we're more likely to be breathing well. So feet shoulder width apart. Make sure that the knees are released and not locked behind you. We don't want any of those nervous shakes creeping in. Just take a nice deep breath. Take in your audience. If you are in a conference hall, make sure that you are connecting with them and not getting buried in your notes. All of this encourages the feeling of a conversation. Make sure that those shoulders are nice and back. And last but not least, whether you are online or in person, remember to take your time and smile. Smiling sends a message to your brain that there is no threat there, so it does something for you, but it also invites your audience in and encourages them to connect with you. Message. What do you want to say, and how do you want to say it? Well, first of all, let's look at that 38% that Merebian was talking about, that tone of voice. That's the how we say it. Obviously, tone of voice has a huge impact in how people listen. How many times have we switched through radio stations until a tune starts to really appeal to our ear? The same is true of a speaker. So we have to work hard to make sure that our voices are connected and interesting to listen to. One way that I find can really help me, especially in pre-prepared presentations, is to hum it first. That way I don't get stuck into patterns, but it also encourages me to think about the tune of my voice. That way I can add more colour to the words. Now, no actor would ever dream of going out onto stage without a rehearsal. So why do we think it's all right to walk out into meetings or into presentations without having rehearsed the work first? Sometimes actors have up to 6 weeks, or even in other countries, 6 months to prepare. That way they can get their voices, their message, their lines all interconnected and do the best job possible. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that we need to take 6 months or even 6 weeks to prepare, but rehearsing your speeches, even rehearsing conversations ahead of time, can take away that fear factor and make sure that we get a little bit more practiced in using that tone of voice and in using our body language effectively when we're giving our messages. Now, that 7% becomes incredibly important when we realise that there's only so little it can count for. So we really need to make it count. One way I've found to make sure that my message is very clear is to use the structure what, so what, now what. What do you want to say? What do you want your audience to know? Well, I want you to know that you are all capable of making an impact, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So what? So why should I do it? Why is it important? Not just to you, but to me as an audience. This is where story can really come in. Sharing something personal, something that involves a little bit of storytelling, can really start to hook your audience in and make it feel much more connected. So, the reason why I think impact is important is because when I was 5, I was so shy I wouldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't even understand how anyone could make an impact when I was so crippled with fear. But over time, by being introduced to lots of inspiring people, by being given lots of opportunities, and by rehearsing an awful lot, I started to learn how to make an impact and how to make the most of the opportunities that came my way. Now what? Now what do you want your audience to do? Well, after these 6 tips that I'm going to give you to add to your presentation toolkit, I would like you to go out and to apply it. Apply it in your conversations in shops, in meetings, in presentations. Start to build it into your everyday life so that you can become the experts. This structure means that you can be free with the information that you give. It doesn't bind you in too much, but it also means that you won't go off topic. It's great for Q&As, it's great for interviews, it's great for free-form conversation or networking events, but it's also great when you're creating a speech. So when you're thinking about your message, come back to that structure. Presence. It's one of those funny words, isn't it? Presence. What does it mean? Well, to me, it's that moment when Romeo and Juliet's eyes meet across a crowded room and they're instantly connected. Or that moment if you're lying in bed at night and you hear someone moving around downstairs. Suddenly, you're very much in the moment. Now, that feeling of being in the moment, totally connected to who you're talking to, is exactly where we want to be when you're presenting. So that's what we're going to look at right now. How do we create that sense of presence when dealing with an audience? Now, the thing that stands in our way most of the time when we're dealing with trying to achieve a present state is what I call the what ifs. What if I forget my presentation? What if people find me boring? What if the slides don't work? What if people walk out? What if I don't get the job? All of these what ifs get in the way of us actually connecting with an audience. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a few things to help get you out of your head and into the world around you. First of all I want you to do is, just like before, make sure that you're standing nice and centered. That's feet shoulder width apart, knees bent slightly and not locked behind you. And let's put your thumb in your belly button and let your hand rest underneath. For me, that's on the squishy part of my stomach. I just want you now to take a few breaths into the palm of your hand. Already, hopefully, you're feeling a little bit more relaxed. Now, as you start to do that breathing and breathing lower into your abdominal area, you can start to do a little check-in. Check in with your thoughts. Are they busy? Are they noisy? If they are, just invite them back to the breath. Check in with your body. Notice if it's tense. Don't try and change it too much right now, but just notice. You can come to that later. The next thing I want you to do is I just want you to connect to the space that you're in. Now, this counts even if you're doing an online meeting. Just check in with the four corners of the room. In a conference room, this is really effective because what it does is it means that you will fill the space that you're in. You'll naturally adapt to it and you'll look a lot more comfortable and a lot more present in the space. Online, it means that you take up that space and don't start to close yourself in and close yourself off. So count the four corners of the room, fill that space. The next thing I want you to do is just take your noticing to other things in the room. Start to really notice what you can see. Look for the colours, the textures, the shapes. If it's a room that you know well, see if you can notice something new about it. All this does is it takes us out of our head and into the world around us. And that's where we need to be when we're trying to get rid of the what ifs. If we're stuck in our head the whole time, we forget that we're trying to affect somebody. We're trying to create an impact. And in order to do that, we need to change them. They're going to be changed by our actions. That means that we have to work quite hard to affect them. Getting out of our head and starting to notice is a great game to play just before you start that meeting or presentation. The next thing I think will be useful to do is just really open your ears. See how many sounds you can hear for 30 seconds. Again, this exercise just tunes you into the space around you and gets you outside of your head. It also starts to really work on your listening skills. And remember, even when you're giving a presentation where it's a speech, you've still got to really listen to your audience and feed off their energy. The next thing that I want you to do is really useful to have in your pocket just before you step out onto stage or click join on that meeting. I want you to put your hand in front of your mouth and take 3 breaths to the palm of your hand. As you do this, the feeling of the breath against the palm will send a message to your brain to regulate it. So if you feel that breath getting a little bit shallow or a little bit fast as the nerves pick up, this will just calm you down and bring you back into a present state. Feeling that breath against the palm tells your brain to just relax. There's no threat here. Again, a little reminder to make sure that you're wiggling your toes, feeling connected to the ground, whether you're online or in person. Breathe to fill the 4 corners of the room, whatever space that you're in. And work to affect the person that you're talking to. By doing that, the what-ifs will quieten and you can make the most of your time presenting. Audience. Who are you speaking to, and what do you want them to leave with? Knowledge? Goals? Researching your audience is a really important part of your prep. Think about what they need. What do they expect? By doing that, you can really target your speech towards that or your meeting. Considering what people need also releases you from that in the spotlight moment where we feel like everyone's looking to us for the answers. If we're focusing on actually trying to fulfill the needs of our audience, we become less focused on the what ifs and more focused on them, which is no bad thing. Now, if our speech is perhaps something a little bit more formal, we might want to consider what we're doing to that audience in that environment. Are we educating them? Are we informing them? All of this will help give us a shape to the speech. But also, if we're dealing with something a little bit more formal, we're probably going to rely a little bit more on that 38%, the tone of delivery, because we're less likely to be able to move around. It also means that we can be very focused on our clarity and our diction when we're speaking, because likely we're speaking to international audiences or certainly a wide variety of different positions. Clarity is key. Now, if we're dealing with something a little bit more informal, we may well be dealing with our colleagues in a meeting environment or people that specialize in our particular area. Then we can bring in that 55%. We can introduce slightly more relaxed body language. You can even move around the room if you want to. All of this helps to create connection and intimacy with your audience. I would definitely bring this idea of how you affect your audience into the body of your speech as well. In fact, I invite you to use these tactics throughout. Think about what you're doing to your audience at the beginning. Are you welcoming them? Are you tickling them? By the middle, what are you doing? Are you challenging them perhaps? And by the end, consider what you want them to leave with. What do you want them to leave feeling? All of these things will invite this presentation to be more of a conversation with the audience you have. And by doing that, it's much more likely to make an impact. Connection. You are much more interesting than any flip chart, slide, or film that you want to show as part of your presentation. So remember that. Take up your space and give these things the time that they need. Don't overcompensate and don't let them do the work for you. If you're going to use a slide, give it space. And then continue with the presentation. These things are here to enhance what you're saying, not do the work for you. So one way to think about this that I think can really help is to imagine that you've got a light in your eyes. Wherever you're looking, the audience are following the light. So if you're looking at them, they feel focused on. If you're looking over here, they're going to look here. If you look back, they're going to connect with you again. So try to avoid speaking at the slide or at the visual aid, because otherwise we lose you and you're giving it far too much prominence in your presentation. When you are presenting, another way of maintaining that connection with your audience is, of course, eye contact. It comes into those lights in your eyes. And think about that when you've got a presentation that's written down. Try not to write it out like a script, no matter how tempting that can be. Trust that if you've done the prep, you've rehearsed, that all of the work is done for you. Allow yourself to be the expert. Write yourself bullet points. Rehearse with the bullet points. It will give you much more freedom to lift your eyes up and connect with your audience. Another trick with this is to follow along those bullet points with your thumb. As you do that, it means that if you ever lose your place or you feel like you're losing your way a bit, you can look down, find exactly where you need to be straight away, take a breath, and I guarantee the flow will come back. Remember, as long as you're breathing, you're thinking. Trust, the final point on our journey. If you've done the prep, if you've rehearsed, if you've really thought about the needs and the expectations of your audiences, then all you need to do is trust. You're the expert after all. Things inevitably may well go wrong. That's the beauty of anything live. And that's wonderful. I can't begin to tell you the amount of outtakes I've got from these pre-recorded presentations. If things go wrong, embrace it. Trust in the mistake. Remember, breathe, think, ground yourself, and carry on. By making mistakes, we show people that we're human. People aren't interested in what goes wrong, they're interested in how you recover. So don't dwell in any mistakes, move forwards with it. Trust in the work that you've done. Go forth and apply it. I challenge you now, even to take one thing from one of these steps and start to integrate it into your presenting routine. Remember, rehearsal is at the heart of all of this. The more we do it, the easier we become with it, and the more natural it will feel. Hopefully, over time, it will start to feel like second nature. Most importantly, presenting should be an enjoyable thing. Try and have fun with it. And when in doubt, smile. Remember, it relaxes you. Good luck.